Hello to all of you wonderful moms out there. Welcome to episode 77 of Achieve Your Ambitious Mom Life. I'm your host, Anoki Kapasi, and today we're diving deep into a topic that's going to hit home for so many of you high-achieving women. It's about how an identity crisis could be what's fueling your burnout. Have you ever felt like you've completely lost sight of who you are beneath all of those responsibilities that you have? And do you find yourself working at like 500% all the way until your body and your mind simply can't take it anymore? Maybe you've put all your eggs in one basket, your career and other things, only to realize that your sense of worth has become dangerously tied to those accomplishments. If any of this resonates, then you're going to want to listen to today's episode. It is the first of an incredible two-part conversation that I have with Dr. Jihane Farrell. Now, I usually bring on guests for their expert advice on a topic. Jihan is an expert in her own right. Jihan has a PhD in cell biology and has worked in biomedical research for over a decade, including anti-aging research. And now she hosts her own show called the 40s Fitness Reset podcast. But I actually invited her for something beyond her professional expertise. And I'm so excited about today's show because Jihan has gone through a full self-discovery transformation. And I think you're going to learn so much from her experience and her journey. Jihan shares her raw, powerful journey from being a workaholic cancer researcher who experienced complete burnout in a toxic environment to then discovering a life of meaning, balance, and purpose. What makes Jihan's story so valuable is that she did the hard inner work of self-discovery before becoming a mom. And so that allowed her to approach motherhood from a piece of intentional alignment rather than this added strain. But don't worry if you are experiencing burnout right now as a mom, because everything that she learned and that she talks about are things that we can use in our lives today. And this is the part that we are really going to go deep on in today's episode. And then in the next episode, which will be part 2 of our interview, we're going to explore Jihan's step-by-step process for rebuilding her life. So if you're ready to learn about how to avoid burnout and instead create a path that's deeply fulfilling rather than really successful by external or societal standards, then you're going to want to listen closely to today's episode. Are you looking for a way to blend success and motherhood without losing sight of who you are? I get it. I've been there too. Hi, I'm Anoki, a PhD researcher, business owner, and homeschooling mom of 2 boys. As your life coach, I help moms like you create a life you love at home and at work. If you're ready to stop feeling overwhelmed, overscheduled, and overlooked, and want a clear roadmap to a balanced life, a meaningful career, and finally feeling like yourself again while being the awesome mama that you are, you're in the right place. In this journey to create the life you truly desire, it's time to rediscover your dreams and achieve your ambitious mom life. So welcome, Jihan.
Hi, Anoki.
So good to have you.
I'm so glad to be here today.
We met, I think, on an online community, and we've spoken a couple of times, and ever since then, I've just been so fascinated with your story, just your whole journey. I really resonate with it, and I think that my audience will too. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on. And I know that you have a business and all of that as well. So we'll get into sort of the juice of your journey and the details and then where you are now. But I just wanted to just really appreciate that you're being so generous with your time to be on. Because when I coach my moms, they have gone through really similar journeys with you. And they have the benefit of having sort of formal life plan that I can help them with. But you are like me, where we kind of found ourselves in a certain situation and sort of stumbled upon needing to do this inner work and self-discovery. And often my clients are really shy to tell their story and to come on and share their story. So although we didn't work together on this, I really appreciate that you can come out here and tell your story. So I think it's going to be really valuable.
Thanks, Anoki. I really love sharing what I've been going through because I know personally I found a lot of hope and nuggets of knowledge and inspiration in other people's story. And that's really what I'm hoping people get. It's funny because when you told me about your process, I realized that there are many things that I've done that are very similar to the process you have in place. So that makes me feel like you really are on to something.
Thank you. I hope so. I think so. I really do feel like I'm helping people. So thanks for saying that. So we're definitely going to get into the details. I have so many questions.
Let's go.
Okay, perfect. So you transitioned from a career in academia and cancer research and aging, I believe, to health coaching. So can you walk us through your work environment and what it was like when you were first experiencing burnout and just sort of the situation you found yourself in before the inner work journey that you did?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am originally from France and got my PhD there and moved to Canada to do a postdoc. So I'm guessing your audience might be familiar with that, but it's really one easy way to put it is that it's a short-term research contract. So I came to Canada to do that, and I had a contract for 5 years, which is not that short, not that long, but it's something that's not going to be a lifetime, right? Came to Canada with that, and I moved here all by myself, and I guess my story really starts there because I was very lonely. I had a really strong social group in France, friends that I was doing life with, and I just extracted myself out of this environment to come here in Canada. The culture difference is not huge, but it's big enough that you can feel it, you can experience it. I didn't really have anybody that I knew. I was slowly meeting my coworkers. Yeah, I was really by myself. So a lot of loneliness. And that's where it started. At the time, so I was doing research. I was very invested in what I was doing. Really had a strong sense of this is a mission that I'm working on. I derived a lot of meaning out of my work. Like you said, I started with cancer research. I moved on to anti-aging research. But really what had driven me to that point was a desire to help people, to get healthier, to save lives. And I still believe to these days that, research can do that for people.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of meaning out of my work, but the fact that I was all alone here in Canada, I had a strong sense of meaning out of my work. But unknowingly to me at the time, it was also where I found my identity. I was my work. I was this thing I was trying to accomplish. This was everything for me. And I just got in a place where I didn't have any sort of balance. I was working 7 days a week. I was in the lab, long days, long hours, weekend, it didn't really matter. My postdoc started with a pretty challenging assignment, something I had never done before. And I really took it on and I was like, okay, I'm going to crack this. This is a puzzle I'm going to solve. And I just threw everything that I had at it.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I just didn't know it at the time, but I was on a pattern. Looking back, I already had that pattern when I was a PhD student of working really hard at something for weeks on, then coming to a point where I'm like, I can't take it anymore. I'm physically exhausted, I'm mentally exhausted, and kind of having a crash, having to take a couple of weeks to recover, and then get back at it. And this was a cycle I was on, which really was like a red flag for burnout. Because I didn't know how to balance anything. Balance was really kind of a foreign concept to me. I was just like that person who was going 500% for as long as my body could take it until my body couldn't anymore. And so I took this pattern with me into my postdoc. And on top of that, so there's the loneliness. On top of that, I had lots of really bad habits. I used to turn to drinking, to get a sense of relaxation, a sense of being able to not be so serious anymore, kind of a way to disengage from work. But I overdid this just as much as I overworked. So that was very unhealthy. And because I was working so much, I didn't really pay attention to what time I was eating at, the kind of food I was having. Sometimes was just like convenient on the go, whatever it could be, like I could quickly eat. And so all of those pieces led me to a place where I was just very unhealthy. I also discovered through an expert's talk, that was someone who was talking about burnout, that there are sort of ingredients that go into the recipe of a burnout. So for me, I just shared those were kind of my personal circumstances, my bad habits, my lack of awareness around certain patterns that I had. But also in the workplace, sometimes there are conditions that are going to foster this possibility of burnout. I wasn't getting much credit for my work, so lack of recognition. I didn't feel really valued. Acknowledgement, yes. I didn't have a community. So I can't remember now all of the boxes that go into that, but I heard this lady talk about it and I checked so many and I'm like, oh, That was years after my burnout, but that's only at that time that I realized it was a burnout. So if you will, there was the perfect storm brewing with the conditions I was working within, at work, the lack of recognition, the long hours. And then there was sort of the personal issues that I had not managing myself really well. And and this really led me to a burnout. I love the work that you're doing because I think it's important that we know these things a little bit better so we can, because there's a way to avoid it. But if you don't have the awareness, then it becomes harder to avoid that.
Yeah. Wow. There was so much information there. So much value. I almost want to take what you said and recreate that list of burnout. I mean, I heard things like not following a balanced life, sort of workaholic and addictive tendencies,
Yes.
which is really interesting because I don't have a lot of addictions per se, but I think my biggest addiction is workaholism,
Right.
like I just throw myself into my work. But I think that's really common for high achievers. And then when you don't have work or something that drives you, you throw that that extremism that you have in you into something, and whether it's a substance or some other kind of addiction. I heard you say that unhealthy and bad habits, physical, mind and body stuff, and I think you brought some other ones up. So it sounds to me like as it was happening, you weren't fully aware that this was a true burnout, that you weren't fully aware of those red flags. It was afterwards, after you had already started your inner work and maybe even was coming out of it at the other end, that you then retrospectively realized it was burnout. However, what was that breaking moment for you? You said you kind of described it as a perfect storm. It must have accumulated to a point where you decided, okay, I have to make a change, even if you didn't have a label for it. So
Well,
what was that for you?
yeah, there absolutely was a breaking point. I think that burnout, if you don't recognize it, if you don't catch it, and if you don't start to put in place strategies to help you avoid the breaking point, then it's a slippery slope where you're going to find yourself at the bottom, right? And for me, actually, the breaking point was my postdoctoral contract was coming to an end, and my boss had alluded to the fact that I could maybe get like sort of a promotion and get a position I was interested in a startup that we were starting to put in place, a spin-off of what was going on in the lab. And this was a project I had been involved in. I single-handedly delivered a proof of concept on this. And I really thought I was, pretty much set up to transition into that startup. My boss had made an allusion to it. No, nothing formal, no promise, but just enough so that I was like, okay, this is the direction I'm going to take. And in a certain sense, I had put all my eggs into the same basket. I was trying to prospect for other postdocs, but I didn't really go through with it. And I just assumed I was going to transition into that. However, with the burnout and things in the lab started to go in a weird direction. So I think it was really my attitude that put me in a dangerous situation, because with the burnout, I was highly irritable. I was not a very good team member. I had become sort of the toxic person in the lab, to be really honest with you. When I look back at this, that makes me very sad. And I think really a big contributor for me was the loneliness. And it can be difficult to explain what loneliness does to someone's brain, but I can tell you from experience that you become a different person. And so I had become so toxic. And I think my coworkers, I think, got to a point where they didn't want to work with me anymore. Where, my emotions were not manageable. They didn't know what they were going to get, who they were going to get. And my work performance was on the decline as well. And that is due to burnout. That is one of those well-known signs. I was still working hard, but things were not really going well. Things were not working out. This led to a point where at the end of my contract, I was simply told, well, we're not seeing a role for you in the next chapter of what's going on in the lab. And that was just that. My contract came to an end, and I didn't get that position that I was sort of assuming that would be for me, right? I just was left with no recourse because I had not applied anywhere else. I had not searched for anything else. There I was, and all of a sudden everything kind of ended. So part of it was, for me, a lack of preparation, not being very smart in the sense that I didn't have any plan B or anything. Just over the course of a few months, things just really degraded. My So like I said, my attitude, my relationships, and work, the performance was not there anymore. So the breaking point was for me to lose this opportunity. I remember thinking, okay, what should I do? Maybe I could apply to other jobs. And also, I'm here in Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada. The opportunities in Edmonton are a bit limited, so I would have had to maybe apply in bigger cities like Vancouver or Toronto to maybe have more options. But at the time, I was also in a relationship, and this didn't seem very feasible anymore. So I was at a crossroad. It felt to me like someone had pulled the rug from underneath my feet. I mean, I put myself on the rug. I'm not blaming anybody, but this really was how it felt. And that was, for me, the breaking point.
I see. Wow. I really appreciate how honest and raw you're being. Thank you so much. I actually really believe that all of us can relate to some aspect of your story. I don't know if all of us have necessarily been through the ringer the way that you have. Something you said about putting all of your eggs in one basket, the lost opportunity and not having a plan B, that really for me kind of hit home, because right now I think that a lot of us sort of in our motherhood stage of life are experiencing burnout. So I do believe that often for us high achieving women, we've been very career oriented and we have been working really hard. Our definition of success is really tied to these accomplishments that are often professionally related, right? And maybe we have experienced some degree of burnout in that pre-motherhood phase, but what I have been coming across are a lot of women, moms, who at this stage maybe are or are not as active in their careers right now, but are still experiencing burnout and are having trouble kind of figuring out where to place their energy. And I think this not having a plan B thing is part of the reason, because when all of your identity is put into these career related accomplishments and your identity is shifting now in your new role as a mother, you're searching for something to put your energy in, something to drive you. With my podcast, a lot of people who listen to me, their focus is their family. So it's not that they want to let go of their family, but they need this other extra thing. And that's sort of where they're finding their burnout, is because they're throwing themselves into motherhood without this other external thing, like the acknowledgement part and all of these other things. I know this is very different than the experience that you were having, but I think a lot of the same things are still there. I'll give you a personal example where at one point I voluntarily chose to step down from work, and I did it with a very intentional reason. I wanted to be there for my kids and for my family at their very young age. But what I didn't realize was that I also needed to have like specific projects to work on, feel like I was still moving ahead in my career. So not having that and throwing all my energy into cleaning the house and just treating motherhood like it was a career, like trying to show up in this sort of workaholic way, I would get irritable, like you were saying. I was pushing my body to a weird limit where I was becoming very unhealthy. So a lot of the things that you're saying, to me, reflect burnout, but in a very different way. Like I wasn't in a toxic environment, but in the least, my family is a very loving family, very supportive, but I did feel lonely. And I hear other women who talk about motherhood the same way. And I think it's really sad because I think motherhood is such a blessing. I waited my whole life to be a mom. And many of the women that I work with waited so long to become moms because they were so career focused. It has been a little bit of a journey to becoming a mom. So it's this very exciting, we feel so appreciative to be blessed with the role of motherhood. And it's very confusing to then feel like, why do I feel so burnt out? And I just appreciate your story, even though you might have found yourself in that position pre-motherhood. So what advice would you give to other high achieving women who might be heading towards burnout, but they don't recognize the signs of that yet, especially moms?
Yeah, I would say I think it's a good idea for women who have that drive, this ambition, or, the strong desire for achievement in their life, to be aware of what burnout can look like and make it very personal. So, what does it feel like in their body or in their mind when things start to get too busy, overwhelming? So Yeah, I would say awareness of the way it comes out for them personally. So there are like sort of the universal signs that have been
Hmm.
shown to be associated with burnout, and we can go over it if you'd like. So a loss of overall vitality, so you're not, excessive fatigue, so signs of like being tired and you don't have that sort of life force in
Hmm.
you anymore. You could be having insomnia, or you're up at night. Your mind is very busy, racing, thinking a lot. You might notice that your mood is not great. You might
Hmm.
be all over the place with your mood, or in a low mood. Maybe it might depend on people, but also at work, it's been shown that you're making more mistakes at work, or your
Hmm.
productivity is not the same as it used to be. So that those are signs that have been shown to be associated with burnout. And then there's like more of the personal signature. So as I mentioned, for me, it's often irritability, and most of the time, my husband is the sort of the target for that.
Hmm.
But it doesn't have to be. It can be coworkers and so on. Yeah, irritability, exhaustion. Maybe your mind is racing more than usual.
Hmm.
Yeah, and
Okay,
I would invite people to try and figure out what it looks like for them personally,
I
because it might
see.
be different.
I see. So really just being aware of the red
Yeah.
flags
Hmm.
and kind of doing this mental cross check and then
Yes.
understanding which are the bigger triggers or susceptibilities for you personally.
Yes.
Okay, that's really good advice. Sort of if we can transition to that identity component,
Yes.
you're a high achieving mom, an entrepreneur. So for you, how has that definition of success really evolved since your burnout experience? And we'll talk about how
Hmm.
you came out of it, but I think that's a really important component and related to what I just said.
Yeah, no, I love this question, Anoki, and that's something actually I realized when I became a mom. I decided to write my own definition of success, because I had learned from my previous experience that from the burnout, that for me success was tied to productivity and how much time I was spending at work, and maybe the money that I was making, or the status. Status was a big one for me,
Mm,
having the PhD and being recognized. And I guess academia also kind of fosters this desire for being acknowledged, recognized, competition, like some researchers are standing out. So there's a bit of that
yeah.
going on in academia, right? And that was something that was in my heart for sure. I desired to be at the top. I desired to be recognized, and I desired for people to clap about my work. So when after the burnout, and then I transitioned to something else that was more in line with my values and who I am. And then I became pregnant. I had a child. And then I realized, okay, I think I've been wrong all along about the way I thought about success in life. I
Mm,
thought it was about the status. I thought it was about the recognition and all of that. And then I realized when I had a child that there were many other things in life that made me someone who was like the way I think about it is wealth, right? And wealth not in a financial way, but wealth like what else do I have in my life? Is there purpose? So I wrote this definition of success, and so purpose is a big one. Having healthy relationships, being able to slow down, take my time. I'm not constantly in a rush. I'm not constantly pushed running around. Being able to have the richness of interactions with my child or my husband, and I just started to make a list of all those things that we sometimes overlook and yet are probably more important to our fulfillment as human than having that great presentation at the conference where people are going to clap for me. Do you know what I mean? So
yes.
I had to consciously recreate my definition of success, and really look into things that I was not used to look into. And yeah,
Hmm.
things that were more, I don't know how to put it, maybe more spiritual, maybe
Hmm.
more, deeper. Yeah, things that have way more to do with their souls, I guess.
Yeah. So you really took the time to first figure out what was important to you, what
Hmm.
would make you enjoy your life again. So I guess what made you start to assess that? Like, how did you know? What
Hmm.
triggered you to say, hey, I need to step back, sit down, and make this list? I don't know if
Hmm.
it was a literal list. Oftentimes journaling and a lot of
Right.
different ways of reflection can help. I don't
Yes.
know exactly what form your inner work took, but
Hmm.
In my coaching program, the first step is really a lot of the self-awareness of where you're at. Like in science, we do research projects, we always get the baseline measurement before we then start to test and make changes, right? And so I like to have that as the first step, but it's very much this kind of a formal set of steps that I bring my clients through. We go through the self-discovery, all these things come out. I reflect back what they have been telling me. And then together we start coming up with this new definition of success and what brings them freedom and joy in their lives and meaning. But you went through this without a formal process. So I guess what made you realize that you needed to sit down and take this pause? Because I think that people can do this, obviously, even without coaching. So I just want to understand.
That's a great question, Anuki. And I'm trying to think back, and it's really hard for me to remember. I think what prompted me to do this was an overall sense of maybe frustration or lack of satisfaction, and maybe just wanting to know, okay, is what I'm doing working? Am I on the right track or
Sure,
not?
yeah.
Yes. And really just when I did that, I had already been introduced to coaching. And so I think there is also this awareness of I need to be a bit more clear about what I want in my life. Because before my burnout, I was not. And I lived a life that was very much living by the moment. And I was just going where life was taking me instead of me being in the driver's seat and being like, okay, this is the direction I want my life to go. And I'm going to work on taking the steps to get there. Before the burnout, I was just like, okay, maybe, this opportunity. Okay, sure. I'll go there. I'll do this. And I didn't have a sense of direction before that. So all the inner work that you referred to, for me, it was getting closer to my values, reconnecting with my sense of purpose. That started to give me more of a direction. And then I started to put in place different systems that helped me to this day that I'm still using to help me go in a direction that I feel like my purpose is. And I guess this idea of defining success is something that came to me because I wanted to make sure I was going in the right direction. And how do you know that you're going in the right direction? How do you know if things are working for you? Well, it depends on what's important to you. And so this idea of defining success is really kind of what that is, right?
Yeah, I really understand what you're saying. And I think that part of what you're doing during this self-discovery portion is gaining clarity. I think that what happens a lot of the time is that if you're not really clear on those things, like what is going to add more meaning to your life, what's important to you, what your definition of success is, often we're putting all of our energy going down a different track of success. So it's somebody else's definition of success. Like you thought prestige with scientific breakthroughs and having your PhD and that sort of that world was what was important. Or sometimes society defines success for you. Often can happen, especially as women, maybe even as mothers. And so when we're following someone else's definition of success, then we're also pursuing the not the right goals, like goals that aren't really suited for us. So when you reach those, so you're working as hard as you can to reach and achieve those goals, and you do sometimes get there, and then you're like, why do I feel so unsatisfied? Why do I still feel empty? For me, that was the crux of burnout. I don't know if I had classic burnout, but I definitely hit a lot of those things that you were saying earlier on about those red flags. And I know that many of the moms I speak to are experiencing some form of burnout. And to me, I think that is the crux of it, is because we haven't taken the time to define what it is that's important to us. And so we're putting our energy into this, we're misaligned in our pursuits, And so life planning is all about regaining that alignment. And I like to think of myself as a chiropractor for your life because,
I love that image.
Yeah, you're just, once you know, like, I don't know where the spine is. I'm not a chiropractor, but once you understand, like, this is where the spine is supposed to be, and you start one vertebrae at a time, kind of clicking pieces of your life back to place. That is what I feel like I do. It's amazing. Everything that you said is exactly the same process I went through and that I have now formalized and do in my coaching. But like how you talked about having this high level clarity, then establishing what those goals, those intermediate goals are, figuring out like the purpose and values and your vision and all of these things, and then working on the nitty gritty systems that you would need to put into place to get yourself there on a day-to-day basis, from top level down. And I think it's so amazing that you organically got there. I mean, I know your decisions were very intentional, but like it was sort of Not a formal process that you followed.
Yeah, not one that was laid out for me. I guess I just kind of stumbled upon it.
Mm-hmm.
And I also want to say, like, for me, we're talking about, I don't know, was it months or was it years? It took me a long time, right? It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't so from the burnout until I felt like I was, the way I describe it is I came back to life because
Mm-hmm.
it was a little death in a sense, right? You can feel it physically, but there's also the death to self because this was my sense of identity, was my work. And then I'm like, now what? Now what am I
Mm-hmm.
supposed to do with my life? But it took me months. And for me, there was a good 6 months period where I just tried to recover physically from this and started to explore those different pieces. It might have taken me a year to get back on my feet and feel like I had that sense of direction. So it was
Mm-hmm.
a long process. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure, Anoki, what you do, like that's a shortcut for people, right?
Mm-hmm.
When they
Yeah.
work with you, they don't spend a whole year trying to piece
Mm-hmm.
their life back together. You
Mm-hmm.
give them the shortcut. And
Yeah.
yeah, I kind of stumbled upon
Yeah.
these.
That's amazing. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, at the end of the day, they have to still do the work, this
Mm-hmm,
inner work. I can't do it completely for them, but I
mm-hmm,
definitely can hold their hand through the process. And it is much more contracted process. I mean, a lot of women that I talk to haven't even given themselves permission to do what you did. And I know it took you really extreme situation to get to the point where you're like, my mind is broken, my body's broken, my relationships are broken, just my spirit is broken. It sounds like it really impacted you in so many domains of your life that you basically had no recourse except to be like, I'm going to start from scratch here. What is it that
yeah,
I want? But I
I hit
hope
rock
that,
bottom. Yeah, and
yeah.
I think maybe that's the thing with women is we got to be in a place where we don't have any other choice. And then, yeah, I don't know what it is, but I love that you said that. We don't give ourselves the permission to do it.
Hmm. Right. And so a little bit of what I try to do with my podcast is to educate moms to, recognize some of these things that we don't have to quote unquote survive. That way, we can actually, we have so much more control than we realize.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would be, uh, it's my vision that women, moms can, because we have all of these roles, that we can start crafting our lives. Like you said, put ourselves in the driver's seat, be the CEO of our lives, I want motherhood to be a joy-filled experience. I think that it's the most amazing experience that we can have. It's for me, hands down, the most important job I have. And I don't mean to say job like it's a job, and to kind of put it on that plane. I just mean that of all the roles I take on,
Yes.
motherhood is just so important to me. And so it's just so sad to me that sometimes we're so overwhelmed, too overwhelmed to enjoy it and to feel like we have to suffer through it. And so your story gives me a lot of hope. And I want people to see that. Wow, what an incredible conversation with Jihan. I am so grateful she shared her powerful journey from burnout to purpose with us today. Her story actually reminds us that when we lose our sense of identity and we find ourselves completely wrapped up in our work, it's often a warning sign that we need to reconnect with who we truly are. But this is just the beginning, remember, of Jihan's transformation story. So make sure to tune in to the next episode, which is part 2 of our conversation, where we're going to dive into Jihan's step-by-step process for rebuilding her life after burnout. Jihan has a renewed mission to help adults over 40 lose belly fat and build muscle with longevity lifestyles to experience a life to the fullest and to live longer. If Jihan's story resonated with you today and you're struggling with burnout, add my show to your playlist now so you don't miss it when it drops in the next episode. As always, thank you for being here, and until next time, I'm Anoki Kapasi, helping you achieve your ambitious mom life. I hope today's episode will help you create time and freedom to pursue something you love to do. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and tell other purpose-driven mamas about it. Who knows? You might even make a new friend by sharing a tip. It's all free. By the way, it would be amazing to hear what you think about the show when you leave a review on Apple Podcasts. After all, my passion is to make this a great experience for you. I'll see you next week for another episode of Achieve Your Ambitious Mom Life with Anoki Kapasi.